The government coordinated with social media companies to make sure people like me had our accounts suspended. While they allow porn to proliferate, anyone is allowed to attack Donald Trump. There's actually plenty of proof that the government colluded with social media to censor people, and I'm one of them right here.
But let's go ahead and read some of these quotes that a member of this subcommittee has actually said. These are public quotes about religion. Let's go through those. Satan's controlling the church. The church is not doing its job. This comment was made just in 2020 by a member of this subcommittee. The same member of the subcommittee said that Muslims, quote, do not belong in our government. I also find that very offensive. The same representative of the subcommittee has mocked and vilified Muslim members of Congress, saying they represent, and I quote, an invasion of our government, and accused them of being terrorist sympathizers because of their religion.
The members are reminded to abide by decorum of the House. The House will be in order.
I don't want us to base anything on Georgia at all. Please, Jesus, not Georgia. Okay, because Georgia purged 87,000.
Will the gentlewoman yield? I think Georgia matters.
I will not yield. I am reclaiming my time. All right, so there were 87,000 people that were purged that were legitimate voters. So no, we don't want to copy off of Georgia. Also, another GOP voter admits he committed fraud. Another one in Pennsylvania, man who admits he voted for Trump with his dead mom's name because he listened to too much propaganda.
The gentlelady's time has expired.
Investing in NATO security is an America Last policy. All increases in funding should be investing in the United States of America's security and the defense of our own border. The United States overwhelmingly contributes more than our fair share to NATO for Europe's defense. And it's time for European countries to pay their dues.
Putin benefits from this amendment. Putin, a sociopath who is engaged in the most depraved behavior in our lifetimes, killing innocent men and women, targeting hospitals, targeting schools, showing no restraint. This Congress must stand with Ukraine. This Congress can never be seen as Putin's enabler, and that is what this amendment does.
Our policies and our laws are being completely abused, and in the current administration, we have a policy of open borders that is causing unbelievable crime.
The House majority continues to claim that the border is somehow wide open, a myth that we have disproved time and time again through testimony by frontline officials here in front of this committee. The border is not open. It never has been. I'd also want to remind the people and the people that are watching, the American public, that every member of the Republican House majority, they actually voted to eliminate the Shelter and Services Program, which provides the most effective federal support for bordered communities. Bordered communities actually need more support, not less.
According to the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists and its over 57,000 members, abortion is an essential component of women's health care. Abortion is health care. When we criminalize, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I would like the ability to answer my question line. When we criminalize health care, undermine a patient's ability. Thank you very much.
Please, we'll have order.
My Democrat colleague across the aisle, who's 80 years old and has been here over 30 years, just said we're on the verge of a shutdown. She probably just forgot that a few hours ago she voted for the continuing resolution that will extend the budget, and we are not on the verge of a shutdown. So I just wanted to note that for the record. I also urge my colleagues to vote for my amendment. We should pass this Holman rule. We need to protect our kids. No males belong in women's sports and schools, and parents are not terrorists and never should be recommended that way.
I'm very well of the rule of the vote that we took earlier this evening. It may be that the gentlelady doesn't know that there is another body attached to the U.S. Congress called the United States Senate, and they have to vote on the continuing resolution. And when they vote on it, we'll find out what it is that they do with regard to this continuing resolution passed by the House, which, quite frankly, is flawed to a fare thee well. Flawed to a fare thee well in meeting our obligations, both domestic and international. And by the way, it isn't a law of the land or done until the President of the United States signs it. That may be a basic level, a lesson in civics. There is the House, there is the Senate, and there is the President. And quite frankly, the budget agreement that had been signed by the President for a basic primer in civics is that the budget agreement passed the House overwhelmingly, and it passed the Senate, and it was signed by the President. It's the law of the land, which my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have dismissed, walked away from, and quite frankly, don't understand the process of government, an unwillingness to govern and an inability to govern.
Were you aware of this?
Congresswoman, as I said, I haven't seen the photos that you're holding up before.
Maybe, well, I posted them on my Twitter account. It's public. You know, maybe
I don't
you guys
spend
are,
a lot of time on Twitter.
Well, you know, oh, I'm sure you do, because the Department of Homeland Security, organized with other offices, has censored many Americans, including myself.
I'm not part of the Department of Homeland Security.
Right, Mr. Ray, you should be interested in investigating terrorism, and this right here is proof that we had terrorists in our own office building, global intifada, and you rely on the Southern Poverty Law Centers. Katrina Bleakley is one of the organizers. I'll send this over to your office, so maybe perhaps you can stop targeting innocent grandmothers and veterans who walked through the Capitol on January 6th and might actually go after people tied to Hamas, tied to Hezbollah, and likely Iran. Mr. Ray, are you interested in members of Congress that are organized and participating in a Facebook group that has ties to Hamas?
We're not investigating people for participating in a Facebook group.
If anyone is going to be charged and forced to remain in jail, forced to be serving prison time for obstructing an official proceeding, then Jabal Bowman should face the exact same fate for every single January 6th defendant. He should have told Capitol Police immediately that he made a mistake, as he claimed. But it wasn't a mistake, Mr. Speaker. It was on purpose. It was intentional.
Mr. Speaker, it is really rich to get a lecture from someone about civility who stood on this House floor and screamed and interrupted the President of the United States during his State of the Union. Or somebody who continues to circle the wagons and cheer on the insurrectionists who attacked this Capitol violently on January 6th. I was the last person off the House floor on that day, and I saw what happened. And for people to come down here and defend those actions, it is pathetic and disgusting.
When we talk about protecting women, what we've seen is, say, in the state of Ohio was one of the most recent states when their lawmakers didn't have the courage to do what they needed to do because, of course, we believe in gerrymandering. And because we believe in gerrymandering in this.
Point of order. I moved
Please
to strike
stop my
her
time.
I moved to strike her words, deplorable states.
That's not a point of order. Let the gentlelady proceed.
The committee will suspend. Whoa, 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 whoa. The committee will suspend. So I'm prepared to rule. This is not a statement. A deplorable state is not a statement against a person, or it is not engaging in personalities. So I'll continue, and you can reclaim your time.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today as a proud adoptee, a son with two loving parents who provided me with all the love and support a child could ever ask for. But yet, I heard in this chamber a few days ago that someone saying my parents aren't real parents.
Are you a mother?
I am a mother by marriage.
By marriage, I see.
And my wife is here with me, so.
The problem is people like you need to admit that you're just a political activist, not a teacher, not a mother, and not a medical doctor.
Let me be clear, I am their child, they are my parents, and for bigoted, closed-minded reason, certain folks have decided that people who adopt their children are lesser than. But make no mistake, whether you adopted your child, had biological children, or found your chosen family in some other way, you are a parent. And because I haven't seen any of my Republican colleagues in this chamber condemn these disgusting comments, I hope that they don't also agree with it. because I won't allow anyone in this chamber to disrespect my family or yours. And directly to the people who have opened up their hearts and homes to children ready for their embrace, don't let anyone ever diminish who you are. You are real parents, a parent and nothing less. I yield back.
Their
Point
name
of
was
personal
mentioned.
privilege.
And-
You were mentioning my name, Mr. Raskin.
Yeah, no, I understand, but that's not the rule, Ms. Green. I don't think a member.
That is the rule in Congress.
Well, then I'd like
we
a-
can
I'd-
take a point
I'd like
of
the
personal
parliamentarian
privilege.
to rule on whether any member of this committee has the right to interrupt a witness's testimony because they mentioned the name of a member of Congress.
I didn't think any entity should enforce a non-FDA approved vaccine or mask. Guess what? A lot of people agreed with me, but you called that COVID misinformation.
I want to say to my colleagues, don't worry. There's still many platforms you can spread disinformation on, Parler, Truth Social, that have questionable editorial policies but aren't here today.
The gentle lady from Georgia was suspended from Twitter for knowingly and consistently spreading conspiracy theories about COVID-19 vaccine, right? Which is shameful. Shameful, especially in a pandemic where a million people have lost their lives.
You've written several books on right-wing extremism, including Hate in the Homeland, The New Global Far Right. I couldn't find any of your work studying left extremism or Antifa or BLM. I mean, we all know Antifa and BLM riots are responsible for $2 billion on damage across American cities.
I'm an expert on the far right because I spent the first 20 years of my career working in Germany in the post-Holocaust, post-unification surge of far-right extremism. And I know you have a hearing on Tuesday on far-left extremism.
Yeah, but Dr. Miller addressed, just to let you know, this is America. We're not Nazi Germany. Today, I'm introducing a new amendment that would prevent President Biden or any president from selling our strategic oil reserves for political reasons. And to imagine that President Biden would say that he would not consider this bill, President Biden is telling America that he doesn't care about our emergency supply or our national security.
I can summarize this debate of the last 2 days into one sentence. Joe Biden lowered your gas prices and Republicans are upset about it. That's what this is about. The U.S. made $4 billion on Joe Biden's action. Republicans always want to say, well, let's run government like a business. Joe Biden did exactly that when he lowered your gas prices and then made a $4 billion profit for the United States of America.
This next tweet, actually, and I'll just go ahead and read what it says here. It says by a member of this committee, the FDA should not approve the COVID vaccines. There are too many reports of infection and spread of COVID-19 among vaccinated people. I'm just clearly pointing out facts from public
The
statements.
chair reminds the gentleman from California to observe proper decorum. It is a violation of House rules and the rules of this committee to engage in personalities regarding other members or to question the motives of a colleague.
Chairman, I don't know that the gentleman from California was disparaging anyone. He put up a tweet that is a fact that exists online, available for anybody to look at.
You think this is funny? Ms. Spitalnik, is this funny to you? Is babies being murdered in the womb funny to you? Because you're smirking and laughing at me right now.
What's not funny are the black people and Hispanic people and Jewish people and Muslim people who have been murdered in synagogue, in church, in supermarkets, in mosque by white supremacists.
Are you aware that all colored people are murdered? That is a fact, that every single color person has been murdered. That's not unusual. It's not just that people of color are murdered. White people are murdered too. Murder is not just for minorities. That may be a shock to you because you seem to dive deeply into all kinds of misinformation and seem to be uninformed yourself. Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, in his inability to enforce the law, has engaged in a pattern of conduct that is incompatible with his duties as a civil officer of the United States. Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, in his failure to uphold the oath he took, has, by his actions, lost the trust of the citizens of the United States to faithfully execute the laws of the United States. Wherefore, Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas thus warrants impeachment and trial, removal from office, and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States.
Ms. Green is tainting this serious impeachment inquiry with a shoot-from-the-hip stunt that is reckless, partisan, and manifestly unserious. If Ms. Green is successful in redefining impeachment, then the next time Democrats have the majority, we can expect this new definition to be turned against the conservatives on the Supreme Court and any future Republican administration. And there will be nobody to stop them because Republicans will have now signed off on this new and unconstitutional abuse of power.
I'll yield to anyone on this committee who disagrees that murder in schools is not murder. I yield.
Will you yield?
Oh, I'll yield. Yes, please.
You want to know why the shooter is dead in Nashville, the trans shooter? You want to know why? Because a good guy with a gun killed that woman. She identified as a man. She was mentally ill, probably taking hormones, and she went in and murdered children and adults in this Christian school in Nashville.
Because you guys made it easy for people who don't deserve to have weapons, who are mentally incapable of having weapons of war, being able to buy those weapons and go into schools. You know why you don't hunt with an AR-15 with a deer? Because there's nothing left. And there's nothing left of these kids when people go into school and murder them while they're trying to read. You guys are worried about banning books. Dead kids can't read.
This is a defund the FBI campaign effort. Again, thousands of FBI agents who work hard every day to take bad guys off the streets.
That was quite entertaining from someone that had a sexual relationship with a Chinese spy, and everyone knows it. But
I move to take our words down.
Congresswoman, let me assure you that we're not letting it go on. We are fighting this.
No, I reclaim my time. You're a liar. You are letting this go on, and the numbers prove it. You can't lie about the facts, Secretary Mayorkas.
It's pretty clear that the rules state you can't impugn someone's character. Identifying or calling someone a liar is unacceptable in this committee. And I make the ruling that we strike those words.
That means that the member can no longer speak in whatever the proceeding is that those words were said.
Personal inquiry, point of personal inquiry.
There's no such thing.
Stand by just a second.
Now, we do know today that we're not here because of any wrongdoing of President Biden, but because this is all part of Donald Trump's campaign. And his most extreme allies, including some members of this committee, are now retaliating. In fact, some members have been trying to impeach the president since day one. Now, this is a tweet here. I'm going to read it. It says, 2 years ago, I introduced articles to impeach Joe Biden on his first full day in office. We will impeach Biden, bolded with an exclamation point. And you see the actual resolution here. So we have the receipts to prove it. There really is no reason why. They don't care why they want to impeach the president, but they've been trying to do it now for years. Here you have, of course, a member of this oversight committee posting about introducing articles of impeachment on President Biden's very first day in office. And now the Speaker of the House is empowering these people in a desperate attempt to keep his job.
Hunter Biden paid for this woman to do this with him, to travel across state lines from California to Washington, D.C. on June 15th. This is a violation of the Mann Act. This was prostitution. This is evidence of Hunter Biden making sex. Excuse me, this is my time. Making pornography.
Should we be displaying this, Mr. Chairman, in the committee?
Gentlelady's time's expired.
If the gentlelady from Georgia wanted to follow evidence, we should also take a look at hypothetically a case where sex trafficking charges against a 17-year-old girl potentially.
The gentlelady's time's expired.
Today's hearing is like most of the majority's investigations and hearings. A lot of allegations, zero proof, no receipts, but apparently some pics.
Hunter Biden needs to be held accountable for his sexual exploitation of women. And we've shown more evidence. We've shown evidence. This is what it looks like. This is what Mann Act violations look like.
Mr. Chairman.
I reclaim my time.
I'd like to challenge the use of this exhibit under Clause 6 of Rule 17.
It is sad that my
Point
Democrat
of order.
colleagues
Point of order.
pretend to care about women's rights while allowing Hunter Biden to exploit women. This is a shame. But let's talk about...
Chairman, there's a parliamentary challenge before us.
The point of
Mr.
order.
Chairman, point of order.
Who's the point? And we'll stop the clock for you, Ms. Green.
Mr. Chairman, our colleague from Georgia has introduced before pornographic exhibits and displayed things that are really not suitable for children who might be watching. And
bathing suit's not suitable, Mr. Raskin?
Well, I'm saying I would like the member to be instructed to not introduce any pornography today, at least without running it
A
through the chair
bathing
first.
suit is not pornography,
Well, we
Mr.
can't see it
Raskin.
from down there, so you didn't make it available to the minority before you
I've
started.
seen it before. It's on the internet. It's everywhere.
You are submitting a naked woman's body.
This is a bathing suit. This is a bathing suit.
And it has not been clear before this committee.
Glasses on. Do you wear them or not? It's a
I have
bathing
contacts in. Thank you.
Congratulations. If anyone's wondering why there's vaccine hesitancy, look no further than the VAERS reporting system, because many of these people's stories were taken off of social media and censored. There's been serious reports of changes in women's menstrual cycle and hemorrhages. Here's 2020 again. That's the same year that emergency use was given for the COVID-19 vaccine. Reports of miscarriage. Ms. Williams, you were right again. Miscarriages increased drastically, but yet no one seems to want to listen to these women.
The comments we just heard, I think, speak to a lot of the other comments that we've been hearing in these hearings, and that is that there is a complete dismantling of the importance of what vaccinations actually have done in this country and how many lives they've actually saved. Vaccines save lives. The pandemic cost us 1.3+ million Americans. It's the single largest, most devastating loss of life event that we have had in the modern era.
Mr. Chairman.
It's the most significant
Yes.
loss of life we've had in the modern era.
Ms. Green, please pause for a second.
I'd like to make a point of order and ask the members to be reminded of the rules of decorum, Mr. Chairman.
What rules are those?
The gentleman from California will suspend.
This is the Democrat and the Biden administration's effort to erase our history, just as they have done to the statue of Robert E. Lee. This is an outrage. This is exactly what they do in communist countries. And the Democrats want to accuse us of book burning while we try to get pornography books out of our children's schools. The Democrats will do nothing to stop their attempts to destroy our nation's history.
Just to clear up a couple of things, my colleague mentioned the founding fathers. Robert E. Lee was not actually one of the founding fathers. He was a general of the Confederacy. That was the city of Charlottesville. That wasn't a national monument when that statue was removed. And I just have to say, I find it rich that the party that has supported book banning in our libraries, rewriting curriculum, not talking about our history over and over again, is the very one that is saying that we have to often keep painful monuments in places where they do damage, where they interfere with people's ability to enjoy the particular area that they're in, and leave it to the Department of Interior to have that discretion. So if we're going to get into talking about book banning and rewriting history, let's have an honest debate about it and talk about the differences between our two parties on this.
Whereas Marjorie Taylor Greene has repeatedly called for violence against elected officials and their families. Whereas Marjorie Taylor Greene has repeatedly espoused anti-Semitic rhetoric and conspiracy theories, including through inflammatory evocations of the Holocaust. Whereas on May 20th, 2021, Marjorie Taylor Greene said that the mask mandate in the House of Representatives was akin to Jews being put in trains and taken to gas chambers in Nazi Germany. Whereas on May 25th, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted, quote, "Vaccinated employees get a vaccination logo just like the Nazis forced Jewish people to wear a gold star." Whereas on February 26th, 2022, no matter the extent of her vile and hateful behavior, now therefore be it resolved that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene be censured. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene forthwith present herself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure and Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene be censured with the public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
My amendment uses the Holman Rule to castrate the salary of Assistant Secretary of Health Richard Levine to $1, the same way he supports castrating children who suffer from gender dysphoria. Richard Levine was a diversity hire by the Biden administration to push the demonic gender-affirming care agenda, and he is unfit to serve as the HHS Assistant Secretary for Health. He has stated that sex reassignment surgery and puberty blockers for kids are life-saving, medically necessary, age-appropriate, and a critical tool. He also said there shouldn't be state laws and actions that dictate principles of transgender medical care by us pediatric experts, illustrating why we need federal protections like my bill, the Protect Children's Innocence Act, for our most vulnerable and innocent children. It is our job to protect our children from sexual groomers like Levine, and reducing his salary to $1 is a strong first step. Our mentally ill Assistant Secretary for Health is more concerned with woke gender and vaccine agendas than serving the everyday health and needs of the American people. He deserves to be fired immediately. This man is a danger to all children and should not be serving in our government.
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. Public servants should be commended and not demonized. Our federal government needs talented, intelligent, hardworking people who are willing to bring their skills, their expertise, their compassion, their experience to public service. Proposing to eliminate the salaries of hardworking public servants is petty and is beneath the dignity of this body, and is not how we should solve differences of opinion on policy. Admiral Levine, I repeat, Admiral Levine is the head of the United States Public Health Service Commissioned Corps. That is one of the 8 uniformed services in the United States. A physician. She completed her training in pediatrics and adolescent health at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York City. The focus of her medical career has been the intersection between mental and physical health, particularly for children and for adolescents. Imagine the knowledge, the expertise, the study, the commitment of Admiral Levine. And given the ongoing mental health crisis in this country, particularly with children and with adolescents, I am grateful and in awe of her expertise and of her service. And prior to joining the Biden administration, Admiral Levine served as Pennsylvania's Physician General and Secretary of Health. My God, what a background. She is highly qualified for her position, and I want to tell her tonight that I commend her efforts to improve the health of Americans across this country. But let's be honest, the Congresswoman from Georgia submitted this amendment to target the salary of a transgender health official. It is as simple as that. It is ugly, it is disgraceful, and I ask whomever is watching and the American people and everyone in this body to note the date and the time when the Republicans in the House of Representatives have hit a new low. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this vindictive amendment. offered to target the salary of a qualified transgender health official who has the expertise and the knowledge to address health issues in a way that many in this body are unable to do. I urge my colleagues vote no on this amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
My amendment uses the Holman Rule to reduce the salary of Secretary of Education Miguel Cardona to $1. Miguel Cardona is unfit to serve the American people as Secretary of Education. He is complicit in allowing biological men to compete against women, in labeling parents as domestic terrorists, and in implementing critical race ideology in schools. Secretary Miguel Cardona's actions are destroying our nation's school systems. He should be fired immediately, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote for this amendment. Protect our kids. This must be done. Thank you, Mrs. Chair, and I reserve my time.
I rise in strong opposition to this amendment. Again, public servants should be commended and not demonized. Our federal government needs talented, intelligent, hardworking people who are willing to bring their skills to public service. Proposing to eliminate the salaries of hardworking public servants is petty, and it is, yes, beneath the dignity of this body, and it is not how we should solve differences of opinion on policy. I suspect that folks could challenge members of Congress on their views and their opinions, but yet they don't have the ability to threaten our livelihoods. Maybe they should have the ability to threaten our livelihoods. Proposing to eliminate the salaries of hardworking public servants is really a stain on this institution. In Connecticut, and I know Secretary Cardona well, Secretary Cardona is well known for a career as an educator, a passion and dedication for students and teachers, a commitment that has now been on full display nationally. You know, when he first joined the department, students and families were facing unprecedented change and disruption to their education. With his leadership and investments made by Congress over the past several years, including the American Rescue Plan and the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, schools now have the resources to strengthen teaching and learning in our classrooms. Under his leadership, schools can better support student academic recovery, address mental health needs, and tackle nationwide teacher shortages. Those are the issues. We need his steady leadership at the helm of a vital agency that oversees our investments, our federal investments in public education. But let me take a second to make a comment, Madam Chair. We are now less than 4 days away from a government shutdown. Instead of focusing on keeping our government open, we are working on a bill that is going nowhere. This is a bridge to nowhere for sure. The harmful funding cuts proposed in this bill and the ugly amendments that demean this body and this institution are on full view. This is not regular order. What we should be doing now is to have the allocations for each of the appropriations subcommittees. We should do what was agreed to by the former Speaker of the House in the budget agreement. And we should be moving toward passing appropriations bills that will provide the services and the resources to the American public in agriculture, in education, in health, in transportation. We should be dealing with the issues of national security which face us today. We should be dealing with the international crises which face us today, which are going begging, about which we are doing nothing. This is an unbelievable waste of time and an exercise in futility with the overview of an ugliness that once again demeans this institution. This is the Congress of the United States. And we are here tonight making petty and vindictive, introducing petty and vindictive amendments that demean the individuals who hold these positions and, once again, demean the dignity, the stature of the United States House of Representatives. I urge my colleagues to vote no on this vindictive amendment.
Mr. Schwartzman, casinos were mandated to cap at 50% capacity, but yet churches were capped at 50 people. Didn't even matter how many people are in their congregation. Do you consider that even-handedly?
I'm not a public health official or
That's
a local
a yes
official.
or no, Mr. Schwartzman.
Well, I think that's a question that you would have to ask Nevada state officials. And the Supreme Court, when it decided Calvary Chapel on July 24th, 2020.
Mr. Schwartzman, I'm asking you, do you consider, in your opinion that even-handedly?
The court recognized, I think, that 1,100 people in the United States died the day that the Supreme Court made that decision, and it was for local officials to respond to those conditions on the ground as they saw fit. And the
Mr. Schwartzman, shutdowns that supposedly prevent the spread of a virus cause suicides to increase in every single age group of all ages. You believe that teenagers should commit suicide because people with comorbidities such as obesity and people at very high risk of dying from COVID-19 is okay as long as the Supreme Court says so. Let's move on.
The risk of the various kinds of activities that you're describing varied greatly, and public health officials use scientific assessments and data to distinguish those kinds of activities and to regulate accordingly.
So you're talking about like Dr. Richard Levine, the man that calls himself supposedly Rachel Levine. I want you to know the Bill of Rights is not a suicide pact. It's important because it protects our rights. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Just in reference to what we just heard, that was incredibly appalling, transphobic, jokes about suicide. And of course, these attacks on religion and on the response today have been really, really hard to hear and hard to see. And I know we've been talking a lot about religion and our rights as Americans, and so I think we should probably review that a little bit and actually talk about what actually somebody and a member of the subcommittee has actually said about religion. So
Point of personal privilege.
I'm
He's
just
attacking my character.
I haven't attacked anyone's. I don't think I've said anyone's name actually, so I'm not attacking anyone's character. This same member of the subcommittee claimed that Jewish bankers were starting wildfires with lasers from space, and this same member compared vaccine requirements to the Holocaust. And so these attacks being made by this member I find pretty disgusting, comparatively looking at the record of what this member has actually said. But we've been talking about the pandemic, or that's what I thought we were going to talk about today. So let's talk about the pandemic and focus on the president that was actually there when the closures first started, and that was, of course, former President Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump has also made numerous bigoted statements about Muslims, Jewish people, and many others. We've all seen those press reports. I won't go through them in my short time today. But this hearing is about COVID, and so let's talk about what actually the president did. And really briefly, Mr. Schwartzman, will you concur that when the closures first started, including at religious institutions, that the president was actually Donald Trump?
Yes, of course.
And let's talk about some of the highlights. Out of the gate, Donald Trump and his administration stumbled. They got testing wrong early on. The administration opted, as we know, to use a COVID testing protocol that contained design issues that set us back in our early testing. Tests were nowhere to be found. On PPE, Trump put his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in charge of the supply chain task force. I mean, come on. He put together a group of volunteers that knew nothing, and none had experience about the supply chains or distribution experience at all. That's the task force that the president put together. Huge failures on PPE and getting access across the country to cities like mine, where I was the mayor of. In fact, Republican Governor Larry Hogan said at the time, and I quote, "Waiting around for the president to run the nation's response was hopeless." And so we've got to be honest with the American people about what Trump actually did during that time and some of the things that Donald Trump said. In fact, some of them are right here on this board. He said that we have it totally under control, quote, "One day it's like a miracle, it will disappear," end quote. Another quote, "It's going away." And another one, "It will go away and we're going to have a great victory." That was the mood and the statements made by the president that actually ordered many of these closures that all of you as witnesses are discussing today, and that my Republican colleagues seem to love to forget. That it was actually President Donald Trump that was there that actually led all of these closures that began happening. So I think that if we really want to get to the bottom of what the pandemic closures were about, I think President Trump should be the one actually addressing these questions at this hearing. So I just want to say finally that the direct result of this incompetence that happened in that administration, which, by the way, President Biden helped fix, cost as many as 200,000 lives that were lost needlessly in those first few months during the pandemic. And so we want to talk about religious discrimination, we want to talk about preparedness about the pandemic, but we refuse to talk about the failures of the Trump administration and how it costs lives in this country. That's what started this mess. That's what we should be talking about. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Joe Biden lowered your gas prices last year, and that makes Republicans mad. And how do we know? They said it out loud. The gentlewoman from Georgia earlier this morning just said that Joe Biden lowered your gas prices for political reasons.
President Biden abused his power to sell our oil, reduce gas prices so that the midterm elections would swing Democrats' way. It's a shame to trick the American people just to win an election. There's no reason the president should be able to sell one of our most strategic resources for political gain. Instead, the president should unleash American energy at home. I urge my colleagues to support my amendment and yield back.
You know, I don't care why a president lowers your gas prices. If any president can lower your gas prices, we should support that president's action. And if prices surge later this year, if gas prices surge again, Joe Biden should be able to use the tools at his disposal and lower your gas prices again. We should be giving the president even more flexibility to use the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to lower your gas prices. Joe Biden lowered your gas prices, and Republicans want to keep him from doing that again. We don't want to stop the president from lowering your gas prices. We want Joe Biden to lower your gas prices again if he could do that. But there's another reason this Republican bill is so stupid. Because not only did Joe Biden lower your gas prices, the United States of America made a profit on it. Buy low, sell high. It was brilliant what Joe Biden did. He released the Strategic Petroleum Reserve at prices when gases were high, and that's helped lower the gas prices, and then he refilled it at the lower amount. The U.S. made $4 billion on Joe Biden's action. Republicans always want to say, well, let's run government like a business. Joe Biden did exactly that when he lowered your gas prices and then made a $4 billion profit for the United States of America. Adopt my amendment, which would make this stupid bill better, and then vote against this bill.
You can consider your speech canceled during my time because you canceled mine. You see, you permanently banned my personal Twitter account, and it was my campaign account also. So let's talk about election interference, shall we? Guess what? None of you hold security clearances. None of you are elected, and none of you represent 750,000 people like I do. These were doctors that were trying to tell the truth about COVID, doctors that were having success treating people with ivermectin that you all would not allow to be talked about on your platform. On Twitter, people could question elections such as 2016, saying Hillary won, but in 2020, no one could question elections saying Trump won. You were censoring and wrongfully violating our First Amendment free speech rights. You argued that minors should have access to Grindr, an adult male gay hookup app.
My Republican colleagues would have folks believe that Democrats are preparing for some sort of major culture war. And there's a difference between a culture war and how culture naturally changes. The reality is that culture changes, it adopts, it welcomes more people, it becomes more understanding, and it also decides to reassess what's acceptable behavior and rhetoric. It could be different now than it was in, say, the 1950s. In this supposed culture war, they often conflate the right to free speech with the non-existent right to not be criticized or held accountable for what you say on the internet or even in real life. And just because it's legal to say something and the government won't throw you in jail for it, doesn't mean the rest of the world, and sometimes even your own family, have to associate themselves with you or your comments.
Mr. Roth, please explain to us why Miss Marjorie Taylor Greene, or the representative from Georgia, was removed from Twitter.
Thank you for the question, Congressman. My recollection is that her personal account was banned from Twitter after repeated written notices due to repeated violations of the Twitter rules.
Can you add a little specificity to the violation of the Twitter rules?
Yes. Again, I didn't have access to my Twitter email, documents, anything that would have let me prepare to answer that in more detail, but my recollection is that the Congresswoman repeatedly violated Twitter's policies about sharing misinformation about COVID-19. She received multiple written warnings about that conduct. She received multiple timeouts related to that conduct. And then ultimately, consistent with the written and published policy, those repeated violations resulted in her account being permanently suspended.
Mr. Chairman,
so in essence,
I'd like to take a point of personal privilege.
It's still my time.
We'll stop. It's
still my
clock.
It's still my time.
Mr. Chairman.
Point of order by Mr. Raskin.
Yeah, I don't believe that members of this committee have the right to interrupt someone's testimony because their name was
Point of personal
mentioned.
privilege.
And-
You mentioned my name, Mr. Raskin.
Yeah, I'm not testifying.
Chair recognizes Ms. Green.
Thank you, Mr.
For your
Chairman.
point of privilege, very briefly.
Thank you. For Mr. Roth, who made you in charge of what is true and what's not true?
Does she get to reopen her question?
No, we'll go back to Mr. Gomez, and Mr. Gomez, please remember the decorum of the committee.
You know, speaking of crime, Republican on Republican crime, former President Donald Trump held a rally in Waco, Texas with his Rasputin Ted Nugent. He said the #1 national security threat to this great nation isn't Russia or China or DC crime, but is an 81-year-old slip and fall survivor in Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. I'm just wondering if, we're going to find time in between, some folks here attending the next rally to celebrating Timothy McVeigh, if we're going to find time to hold a hearing on mass murder in schools. When are we having that hearing? We want to talk about crime and murder. Let's have a hearing on murder in schools. It's murder.
Yeah, when I was in 11th grade and Joe Biden made our schools gun-free school zones, one of the students in my school brought 3 guns to school, and our entire school went on lockdown because he was the only person with a gun. There was no good guy with a gun to protect us kids at school. So if you want to have a good talk about schools and protecting children, we need to talk about protecting our children the same way we protect our president, we protect our celebrities, we protect
reclaiming
this
my
building.
time.
Okay.
I voted for SROs in my schools in Florida after Parkland. We have SROs on every school. Did the good guys with the guns stop 6 people from getting murdered? No. But you know what? AR-15s, seen what those bullets do to children? You know why you don't hunt with an AR-15 with a deer? Because there's nothing left. And there's nothing left of these kids when people go into school and murder them while they're trying to read. You guys are worried about banning books. Dead kids can't read.
Let me explain something to you. I'm not from Texas. I'm not from any border state. I represent a district in Georgia, which is in northwest Georgia. We're not anywhere near Mexico. We're not anywhere near the ocean. But in my district, people die nearly every single day from fentanyl. How long are you going to continue this outrage, complete outrage, where China is poisoning America's children, poisoning our teenagers, poisoning our young people? How long are you going to let this go on?
Congresswoman, let me assure you that we're not letting it go on. We are fighting this.
No, I reclaim my time. You're a liar. You are letting this go on, and the numbers prove it.
You know, we have a history of being a bipartisan committee that work on solutions. Now, we can disagree, but we've gotten to the point of the language that we're using is not the kind of language that historically we, as members of this committee, we've used.
Chair asks the gentlelady if she wishes to seek unanimous consent to modify or withdraw her remarks.
I will not withdraw my remarks because the facts show the proof.
The ruling was that because she used the word liar, that was taken down, which I agree with.
Yes.
But accusing
a statement of fact is very similar to the posters that Mr.
There's no statement of fact.
There's no statement of there's no
statement of
factual
fact.
basis for the statement.
We're not here to debate this, okay? And the ruling was made by the chair that these previous words were not against the rules of Clause 1 and Clause 4 of Rule 17. But to tell someone that they are a liar is, it's pretty clear in the rules.
Slander is clearly covered by the rules. The impugnment, I can't imagine an allegation worse than the one that she just made. I mean, that has got to be in the category of taking the words down.
No, it is not. It does not fit the rules by the ruling of the chair. And we've already voted on that. It is past us. We have the secretary until about 1:30. We're going to move on. And Mr. Ivey, you're recognized for your 5 minutes of questioning.
We're sitting here with a shocking lack of decorum to have a cabinet secretary in front of us who has been subject to ad hominem insults and accusations that are completely baseless. I have now counted that 6 of my Republican colleagues have not asked you a single question. They have used their 5 minutes to speechify, to accuse you of lying, to accuse you of making false statements, and what is a clear effort to try to set up, I suppose, the first step of the 5-phase plan to impeach you. Well, I have a little experience with impeachment, and I can tell you, as well as everybody else, that there is no grounds for impeachment based on a policy dispute. And there is absolutely nothing that I've seen here today that amounts to a false statement under oath.
Well, I'd like to remind you of one of your tweets here where you agreed that my suspension on Twitter, in your own words, politicians shouldn't be exempt from standards about spreading misinformation. Green has repeatedly shown reckless disregard for those standards. This suspension is justified. This is your tweet. Just last year, January 2nd, 2022, I was suspended for my statements about COVID-19 as a member of Congress, by the way. And also, I'd like to point out by the emojis by your name here, it looks like you're more of a political activist than anything. Clearly, unfortunately, you think Ukraine comes before the United States. I'm not sure what the black flex is. I mean, is that digital blackface? But congratulations on graduating from school. But I'd like to
No,
go...
it is about honoring black
Ms.
educators.
Weingarten, I reclaim my time. I didn't ask you a question. None of your advice had to do with to stop the spread of COVID-19. It was all about teachers staying home. And there was big results of that. Let me tell you, I am a mother, and all 3 of my children were directly affected by the school closures, by your recommendations, which is something that you really can't understand.
I just want to make note that the decorum of the attacks on the witness were unacceptable that the gentlelady from Georgia just did. And so it'd be nice if we didn't attack the witnesses, particularly and making a decision about whether or not she's a mother. You are a mother. Thank you for being a great parent. Thank you.
Given that his point of order is recognized, and given that that was not just cruel personal attacks to Ms. Weingarten, who loves her children, it is reflective of the cruel personal attacks to any adopted mother or father who love their children. So I would kindly ask that those remarks be taken out of the record for the sake of all of the parents who have adopted a child and love them dearly and see them as their own.
I am one of those that believe our First Amendment is one of the greatest rights that we have. And I also am so grateful to be an American, always believing that freedom of speech was something that we possessed until the past few years, where myself and many other Americans, Dr. Kuldorff, we found ourselves, I like you, had my Twitter account permanently banned for posting my speech, opinions, and thoughts on Twitter about COVID-19. I'd like to ask each of you, Mr. Weingarten, do you believe in the First Amendment?
Wholeheartedly.
Dr. Kuldorff?
I do.
Dr. Miller Address?
Absolutely.
Mr. Turley?
I do.
Great. Well, it seems that we all share the same belief. But I'd like to ask a question, Dr. Miller Address, if I may. You're an expert on so-called right-wing extremism, including online radicalization by right-wing extremist groups. I'm just wondering, how do you consider your organization, Peril, and a good source of informing people on what they should believe and not believe when you do no study whatsoever into left extremism?
First of all, just to respond to your query about what we teach people, we don't teach people anything. We're just looking at helping them understand what the tactics of manipulation are online so they can make better decisions. We have experts who do work on environmental extremism. We have experts who work on Islamist forms of extremism. But because both under the Trump administration and the Biden administration, the emphasis has been right now on the greatest, most lethal threat, which has been determined to be far right, meaning white supremacist extremism and unlawful militias.
Well, Dr. Miller Address, just real quick, I'm out of time, but would you consider Trump supporters extremist?
We are worried about violent extremism, so that to the extent, not about what people believe, but to the extent that they are moving toward violence.
Trump supporters specifically?
If they're calling for violence, it doesn't matter to me who they support.
Haven't seen any. By the way, there's a great rally in Iowa this weekend. If you want to study people on the right and what they believe, you'll find secure borders, freedom of speech.
Gentlewoman's time.
No crime. Thank you.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. I recognize Mrs. Ramirez for her 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just while we've been sitting in this committee room having this hearing today about left-wing extremism and violence, literally, as we were being gavelled in, we experienced some left-wing extremism of our own on the second floor of this building while we've been in here. The Center for Popular Democracy invaded our office building this afternoon to push their extreme agenda on everything from climate to the debt ceiling. Ms. Spitalneck, you were talking about white supremacy.
It's Spitalneck.
Oh, I apologize, Spitalneck. Ms. Spitalneck, while you were talking about white supremacists and abortion, I totally agree with you. There's a lot of white supremacists in the abortion movement and abortionists because they have murdered over 20 million black babies in America since Roe versus Wade in 1973. That's on average 900 black babies are aborted. And if you apparently care about human rights and you care about studying extremism, let's have a little talk about extremism, shall we? I think that's important because that's what this hearing is all about. I'd like to inform you, or maybe you don't know, maybe you do know, I doubt it, you mostly care about white supremacists and white-wing extremism. But there's quite a pattern of left-wing violent protests on college campuses today.
The statistics tell us that when it comes to politically motivated violence, in 2022, every single murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Every single murder in America was committed by a right-wing extremist?
Every single politically motivated murder was committed by a right-wing extremist.
Are you sure about that?
I am.
Are you aware that the Tennessee shooter just recently identified as a man and she was a biological woman? Was she a right-wing extremist as well?
Gentlelady's time has expired. I'll allow the witness to answer the question.
So that was a shooting that happened in 2023. There is no evidence as to what ideology motivated that shooting. And what we do know is that cisgender males are responsible for the vast majority of mass shootings in this country.
I'm sorry, I don't know what a cisgender male is. There's only two genders. It's male and female. That would be that. So no one knows what a cisgender male is. It's a made up.
Unfortunately, anti-trans invasion
Georgia
language that you've been
yields
using
back. I
does
recognize
nothing but
Mr. Strong
normalize
for
the
his
extremism
5
we're
minutes of
talking about
questioning.
here today.
I was mayor of Long Beach for the last 8 years. So we have a large public health department, city about 500,000 people. So I saw firsthand the impact of our vaccine rollout and how important it was to public health. And our region and broader LA County was hit really hard during 2020, 2021, during that winter surge. Of course, before vaccines were available, our regional healthcare system was at a breaking point. ICUs were full. On certain days, we were losing dozens of lives across LA County. It was a horrific experience. In my city alone, we lost 1,300 people from our community. We know that across the country, we've lost over 1.3 million American lives. One of those lives was my mother. Another was my stepfather. I know the impacts of this pandemic and how destructive it can be on families. I want to remind us that during that time, even there was a regional quality health index around on the quality of air, and the amount of crematoriums that were actually having to be in operation were damaging health air quality. That's how horrific the time was. And I think it's important to remember how bad the pandemic actually impacted us, because I think we have a tendency to forget the lives impacted and the real impact to our economy as well. We did everything we could to get folks vaccinated in Long Beach. We were the first city to vaccinate 99% of our seniors in California, the first city in the state of California to vaccinate our teachers. Both the governor and the president called our approach a national model. But I'm very concerned about the attack on vaccination efforts. I'm very concerned when folks within the Congress, even on this committee, put out disinformation about what vaccines are. There are 3 million Americans today that are likely alive thanks to vaccinations. We know this. And despite this, many of our colleagues and the majority have chosen to undermine COVID vaccinations in general. I want to also point out that misinformation hurts our efforts. We know that Republicans in general are 2.5 more times likely to believe misinformation, and studies have shown that states with higher vaccination rates have had significantly fewer COVID deaths. So these are facts. I want to share some examples of this harmful misinformation today and the rhetoric that has actually led to, I think, a huge public health emergencies in this country. This is the first one tweet that's actually been sent out by a member of this committee, which essentially says that we're suggesting that COVID vaccines are associated with nearly 6,000 deaths and actually encouraging folks to not get vaccinations. Dr. Tan, what do you think about this claim about the 6,000 deaths around vaccinations?
Well, in this country, we have a very, very robust vaccine system that looks at all the different potential adverse effects that may be associated with vaccines. So the problem is that some of these deaths, even though they are reported, it may have been the vaccine was given, but the death was not due to the vaccine itself.
Absolutely right. And to say no, do not get the vaccine is completely irresponsible. Would you agree with that?
I agree.
Dr. Tan, I also would like to go to the second.
The gentleman will suspend.
I'm just clearly pointing out facts from public statements.
The chair reminds the gentleman from California to observe proper decorum. The issues we are debating are important ones that members feel deeply about. While vigorous disagreement is part of the legislative process, members are reminded that we must adhere to established standards of decorum in debate. Remarks of that type are not permitted by the rules and are not in keeping with the best traditions of our committee. The chair will enforce these rules of decorum at all times and urges all members to be mindful of their remarks.
Because we customarily, throughout the Congress, will take quotations and quotes and use them once they appear in the public record. I think this is in keeping with that, and I don't think this was an effort to disparage, but an effort to instead point out what a particular member or members of this committee may have put out themselves in the public space that we all refer to as social media.
At this point, it is the ruling of the chair that the gentleman may proceed. However, I remind the gentleman to be cautious and to understand the decorum. as he proceeds with his remaining time of 1 minute and 46 seconds.
Thank you very much. I'll just read the next few public statements. I appreciate that. This tweet actually says that vaccinated employees get a vaccination logo just like the Nazis forced Jewish people to wear a gold star. Vaccine passports and mask mandates create discrimination against unvaxxed people who trust their immune systems to a virus that is 99% survivable. Do you think that this tweet, which compares vaccinated people to Jewish folks living under the Nazis, what kind of impact would this have, you think, on public health?
I think it would have a negative impact on public health, and I respectfully disagree with that particular sentiment that has been put forth. I mean, we know that vaccines are life-saving, and they should be made available to everyone so that there's no disparity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tan. I really appreciate that. I think it's really important for us to remind the committee and the public about public statements that are made by members of this committee, particularly as questions are asked. And so thank you very much all for your service. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to ask the House to support my amendment, number 33, which will cut the $73 million increase in funding for the NATO Security Investment Program. This is simply keeping the NATO funding at the same level as last year's appropriations level. I think this is very important. While our own border is overrun by border crossers and deadly poisonous fentanyl daily, we continue to send hundreds of billions of dollars to NATO to defend Ukraine's democracy, even though they aren't even a NATO member nation. President Trump was exactly right when he called on European nations to put the required minimum of 2% of their GDP towards NATO defense spending. Most NATO countries still don't meet that requirement, and the U.S. ends up paying for 70% of the alliance's defenses. This is outrageous. The American people do not like paying for other countries' defense when our borders are overrun daily. The current 2023 defense expenditure for NATO countries has the United States at $860 billion. The United States of America's military is not meant to be the world's police. And as we find ourselves funding a war in Ukraine, when the United States' position should be pushing for peace, not paying for and not funding war and death of innocent people, we should not increase our spending and increase the amount of funding by $73 million more dollars to the NATO Security Investment Program. Mr. Speaker, I reserve.
Americans are not fighting and dying in Ukraine. Ukrainians are. And all they ask of the great country they admire and they want to emulate is that we help with equipment and training. This Congress must stand with Ukraine. This Congress can never be seen as Putin's enabler, and that is what this amendment does. That's what's behind it. The author of this amendment has already said she wants to give zero to Ukraine, so we know the motivation behind the amendment. Let's reject it. Let's stand with Ukraine, and let's make sure Putin gets that message loud and strong with a forceful vote here on the floor of the House of Representatives. I yield back.
Let's talk about what mandates have done. This is the VAERS reporting system and how many deaths were reported to VAERS by year. The blue is all non-COVID vaccine deaths. The red is reports of death related to the COVID-19 vaccine. This is 2021, this is 2022. Here's a comedian, Nick Nemiroff, dead at age 32. He said, "I will not get the third shot, I will not. Pfizer me once, no shame. Pfizer me twice, shame on COVID. Pfizer me 3 times, shame on you. You want me to get a third shot? What's next? A fifth? No, thank you." Then he died, age 32. What about all the athletes? This Shane Warne, get your double vax and get on with it and learn to live with it. Australian cricket legend Shane Warne dies in his sleep.
Well, that was a lot. I want to just first start by saying that we know that the VAERS system should not be used as an unverified way of actually looking at the numbers. And so to continue to bring that up as actually a functional way of looking at the impacts of the pandemic is quite irresponsible. The track record on the House Republican side as it relates to this issue in the pandemic has been quite shameful. We know that COVID vaccines have saved lives, period. Every reputable doctor, this has widely been a peer-reviewed, and we know that they have saved lives, and not just the COVID vaccine, it's other types of vaccines as well. And as we've said earlier, as it was mentioned by the ranking member, the House majority invited RFK, who, as we all know, is a conspiracy theorist and a vaccine denier, as a leading voice around issues around vaccines and the pandemic here to the House. We know that his opinions have already been discredited and they're dangerous, and yet he's somehow someone that is uplifted by the House majority on this issue. But beyond that, we know that RFK has made also racist and anti-Semitic statements, falsely claiming that COVID was deliberately engineered, and I quote, an ethnic bioweapon targeted to attack Caucasians and black people, and that Chinese and Jewish people are more immune to COVID. So these are the experts that the House majority continue to listen to, and was invited, of course, to appear to a House committee. Now, this isn't the first or most dangerous anti-Semitic trope that we have heard. In January 2022, he also said the vaccine requirements are worse than the persecution of Jews like Anne Frank during the Holocaust, which killed 9 million people, including 6 million Jews. And what shouldn't be surprising after this course, we have heard continuous anti-Semitic comments from the House majority. We have seen this tweet behind us before, and this person, of course, sits on this very committee, who just actually gave some very irresponsible facts to our witnesses in the committee as well. But just like RFK and other conspiracy theorists, members of this committee continue to attack vaccines that we have
Mr.
had
Chairman,
in the modern era.
Mr. Chairman,
it's the most significant
Yes.
loss of life we've had in the modern era.
Ms. Reed, please pause for a second.
I'd like to make a point of order and ask the members to be reminded of the rules of decorum, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sure. What rules are those?
The gentleman from California will suspend. The issues we are debating are important ones. Members feel deeply about them. You do. Everyone here does. Everyone. While vigorous disagreement is part of the legislative process, members are reminded that we must adhere to established standards of decorum in debate. It is a violation of House rules and the rules of this committee to engage in personalities regarding other members or to question the motives of a colleague. Remarks of that type are not permitted by the rules and are not in keeping with the best traditions of our committee. The chair will enforce these rules of decorum at all times and urges all members to be mindful of their remarks.
Mr. Chairman, what rule did I
Does
break?
the gentlelady from Georgia have any further? Anything?
No.
Mr. Chairman,
The
I'm not
gentleman may proceed.
Thank you. I'm not sure what rule I broke. I actually didn't call anyone out by name and did not actually disparage anyone. I showed a actual tweet that one of the committee members actually tweeted. It's a public statement in the public record, so this is absolutely not disparaging anyone unless the committee member wants to retract what was said up here. We can read it if we'd like. It says, a tweet, it says, vaccinated employees get a vaccination logo just like the Nazis forced Jewish people to wear a gold star. Vaccine passports and mask mandates create discrimination against unvaxxed people who trust their immune systems to a virus that is 99% survivable. So that's actually a public statement. I'm not sure that is an attack on anyone. I mean, I disagree with it, but that's what was said. Let me go ahead and continue. We also know that studies have found that COVID death rates were 11% higher in states, and this is an important point, with Republican-controlled governments and 26% higher in areas where voters lean more conservative. In fact, of the 15 U.S. states with the highest age-adjusted death rates, 13 of them were led by Republican governors during the pandemic. And I say this because vaccine hesitancy, actually, and causing and pushing folks to not get vaccinated, actually leads to higher death, and that is a fact. I want to talk about Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, who's running for president. He, of course, bragged early on about pushing against vaccine mandates, boasted about his record, but we also know that the latest medical journal just last month attributed over 16,000 needless deaths to his failure to get Floridians vaccinated. They also fell behind the national average throughout 2021 as Governor DeSantis increasingly caved to vaccine skepticism, and the constituents paid that price. According to a report in the New York Times, of the 23,000 Floridians who died, 9,000 were younger than 65, despite the governor's insistence at the time that our entire vulnerable population was basically vaccinated, and I end quote. I want to, Dr. Lynch, Is it fair to say that vaccine requirements, along with robust public outreach and access to free vaccinations, result in actually higher vaccination rates?
Absolutely.
And in areas with higher vaccination rates, have we seen lower age-adjusted rates of hospitalization and death due to the pandemic?
Yes.
So it seems fair to conclude that these measures save some number of lives. Is that correct?
Correct.
And is it also true that discouraging vaccines and telling folks to not get vaccinated can actually lead to more death?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield back.
We had thousands of members across the country who returned holiday presents because they needed cash, missed a mortgage payment, took out a short-term loan, and ran up their credit card debt because they had no paycheck for the month.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
State your point. And stop the clock for Ms. Tlaib. State your
Mr.
point.
Chair, I appreciate that.
All government employees are going to get paid at the end of this month, and also the Democrat Party forced shutdowns on the American economy, hurting businesses,
Reclaiming order.
forcing people to lose their jobs, kids behind in school.
It's okay.
That's not a point of order.
You know what?
All right.
That's going to be not true on October 1st.
Hold on, Chair.
Mr.
Recognizes
Chair,
Ms.
but we can't allow
Tlaib.
people to be misleading the American people. We all know. I was here in 2019 when the shutdown was there for 35 days. Because you know what? You do know who said this?
I lost track of the
I know. Doreen Greenwald. She was a member of the National Treasury Employees Union. She said 150,000 workers in 35 agencies. She said this is the irresponsible 2018-19 Republican shutdown from the previous administration. Do you know she also went on to say, because this is important, this is what this committee should be used for.
Now, we do know today that we're not here because of any wrongdoing of President Biden, but because this is all part of Donald Trump's campaign. And his most extreme allies, including some members of this committee, are now retaliating. In fact, some members have been trying to impeach the president since day one. Now, this is a tweet here. I'm going to read it. It says, 2 years ago, I introduced articles to impeach Joe Biden on his first full day in office. We will impeach Biden, bolded with an exclamation point, and you see the actual resolution here. So we have the receipts to prove it. There really is no reason why. They don't care why they want to impeach the president, but they've been trying to do it now for years. Here you have, of course, a member of this oversight committee posting about introducing articles of impeachment on President Biden's very first day in office. And now the Speaker of the House is empowering these people in a desperate attempt to keep his job.
My amendment prohibits funds from being used to remove any monument on land under the jurisdiction of the Department of Interior. For too long, communist Democrats have been hell-bent on erasing our culture, way of life, and our history, whether we agree with it or not. As George Orwell wrote in 1984, they want a future in which every record has been destroyed or falsified. Every book has been rewritten. Every picture has been repainted. Every statue and street and building has been renamed. Every date has been altered. And that process is continuing day by day and minute by minute. And history has stopped. Nothing exists except an endless present in which the party is always right. In 2020, nearly 168 Confederate symbols were removed across the United States, many of which were violently torn down by radical BLM Antifa activists that burned American cities to the ground. Most recently, the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee that stood for nearly a century in Charlottesville, Virginia, was dismembered and melted down in a 2,250-degree furnace. The news media was quick to flood social media with video posts of the statue's head melting down in fire. This was the message. The communists in our country have made it clear that they will not stop with Robert E. Lee and will continue to do this until George Washington's statue is burning in fire.
Look, this amendment is one more controversial poison pill policy rider that sadly shows that the Republicans are not interested in bills that can gain bipartisan support and become law. The amendment would prohibit the Department of Interior from removing any monument on land under their jurisdictions. There can be many reasons a monument would need to be removed: health and safety of visitors and staff. This amendment provides no latitude for the department to steward the land and resources they are responsible for. In 15 days, the government will shut down. Yet we are spending time on a bill that will never become law and on this superfluous partisan poison pill rider. We should be focused on creating a bipartisan bill that abides by the agreement reached in the Fiscal Responsibility Act of 2023. So let's do the job we were elected to do, ensure the American people receive the benefits and services they are entitled to.
Secretary Mayorkas, I want you to look at these innocent Americans. Do you see them?
I do, Congresswoman.
They are dead. They're from Dalton, Georgia, in my district. They're dead because a 17-year-old, likely affiliated with the cartels, was smuggling illegal aliens into our country in Texas, breaking our laws, and this happens every single day in our country. Earlier this week, 8 Republicans joined the Democrats and protected your job. But I want you to know, you have a short time coming. You can honorably resign, or we are going to impeach you, and it's happening very, very soon. Mr. Wray, do you remember on October 18th when the Capitol complex was illegally occupied, breaking same laws that you have hunted down Americans for from January 6th? Are you familiar with this?
I don't recognize the picture that you're holding.
Well, because maybe your agents haven't been doing a good job into investigating the organizers that broke the law, illegally occupied this very building that we're sitting in right now, and over 300 of them were arrested. Some of them attacked police officers. I haven't seen on the news where the FBI is hunting them down with helicopters, tanks in the streets, raiding their homes with flashbangs, targeting these people, watching these people, throwing them in jail for them to stay in pre-trial in solitary confinement for years before they ever face trial. You want to know what this says? I'll tell you. This is one of the organizers' phones, and this is a chat, and it says at the top, Global Intifada. Now, while we're talking about terrorism today, are you familiar with the term intifada?
I've certainly heard the term.
Do you know the definition?
I'm not going to try to define it, but
It means Arab uprising or jihad. Are you concerned about jihad in this country?
I am, and I have consistently testified to that effect.
Yes, but are you interested in using the FBI? You are the director of the FBI. Do you hunt down terrorists in our country? Those that would be responsible for jihad?
Absolutely, and that's why we've had jihadist-inspired terrorism at our highest national threat priority level since the day that I started as FBI director.
Do you still use the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source? You use them. The FBI used the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source when targeting Catholics. Are you still using the Southern Poverty Law Center as a source?
Congresswoman, what I think you're referring to is the so-called Richmond intelligence product, which as soon as I learned about it, I was horrified, withdrew it. We had an inspection done, and part of the problem that we found with that particular product by that particular office is precisely what you're talking about, the reliance on the Southern Poverty Law Center and the way in which they relied on it.
Well, you relied on the Southern Poverty Law Center, but I would have you know, Mr. Wray, that this one right here, this person involved in the Global Intifada group that illegally, they broke the law, came in and occupied the Cannon Office House building, interrupted Congress, interrupted hearings. Right here, Katrina Bleakley is the lead attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center. Are you interested in members of Congress that are organized and participating in a Facebook group that has ties to Hamas?
We're not investigating people for participating in a Facebook group.
A Facebook group that is tied to Hamas?
We have multiple investigations into individuals affiliated with Hamas, and they're active investigations.
You're going to tell me as FBI director you will not investigate Americans or United States members of Congress that are linked to known terrorists?
That's not what I said.
Are you going to investigate or not?
We are going to investigate individuals who are affiliated with Hamas if they meet our standards for predication, which are longstanding standards set by this department and the prior department and the department before that.
I would hope to God that intifada and jihad and terrorists in our very country would be something that you would prioritize instead of a 3-hour event that happened at the Capitol nearly 4 years ago, Mr. Ray. I yield back my time, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Secretary, I know that this last Tuesday night, one of our colleagues also sits on this committee, really decided to waste our time with a very political stunt, which made some deeply unfair and untrue allegations against you, sir. And while I'm glad that 8 Republicans joined us in defeating that resolution, I'd like to take a moment to correct the record for the public and the American people. So, Mr. Secretary, yes or no, is our country currently being invaded?
Congressman, that is a term that I find to be offensive.
And I do as well, thank you. And is invasion, excuse me, this is my time, Ms. Green. Is invasion a responsible way to characterize people who come to the U.S. to seek asylum?
Congressman, I've been asked very often in many hearings now. I heard one congressman actually cite that I've participated in 27 hearings. I didn't realize the number was that large. I am not focused on language. I'm focused on the challenges that we face and making sure that we meet those challenges on behalf of the American people.
Thank you, sir. And is your agency working every day to stop fentanyl from coming into our country?
It most certainly is.
Thank you. And is it true that the overwhelming majority of fentanyl is in fact carried through ports of entry by American citizens into this country?
It is, Congressman.
Is it fair to say that an orderly border actually requires comprehensive immigration reform, which would require congressional action rather than just executive actions?
Congressman, immigration reform is vitally necessary to advancing the security of our border.
Thank you. And Mr. Secretary, I want to thank you. Those are simple questions, but I think that your record keeps being distorted unfairly, and so I want to make sure give you a chance to clear that up. And I think it's also important to hear how we're talking about security and our threats to the homeland, how the current head of the Republican Party spent Veterans Day just recently. So I want to read you this first sentence. In honor of our great veterans on Veterans Day, we pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, lie, steal, and cheat on elections, and will do anything possible, whether legally or illegally, to destroy America and the American dream. Here we see Donald Trump calling his fellow Americans vermin and threatening to root out people based on their political beliefs. This is the kind of rhetoric that reminds me of the worst types of dictators in history, and it's not Trump's first time using this kind of rhetoric. He told an audience in Iowa that immigrants were poisoning the blood of our country. That's a quote. He has promised to violate federal laws in order to build mass deportation camps and promised to restore his Muslim ban. He even wants to cancel legal status for certain categories of immigrants. Donald Trump, of course, has had dinner and hosted open Holocaust deniers and white nationalists. And we all, of course, remember that he praised the white nationalist Charlottesville marchers who chanted, "Jews will not replace us." And of course, he faces federal felony charges for his role in the January 6th insurrection.
Marjorie Taylor Greene just suffered one of the most humiliating defeats of her entire career. Greene introduced a resolution to censure Rashida Tlaib.
A resolution censuring Representative Rashida Tlaib for anti-Semitic activity, sympathizing with terrorist organizations, and leading an insurrection at the United States Capitol complex. Therefore be it resolved that Representative Rashida Tlaib be censured. Representative Rashida Tlaib forthwith present herself in the well of the House of Representatives for the pronouncement of censure, and Representative Rashida Tlaib be censured with the public reading of this resolution by the Speaker.
Days later, the resolution arrived on the floor for a vote, and it did not go well.
I rise to a question of the privileges of the House and offer the resolution that was previously noticed.
The yeas are 222, the nays 186. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Greene lashed out on social media after her vote failed, thanks in part to multiple Republicans joining Democrats to oppose her. One of those members, Chip Roy, put out a press release saying he voted against the resolution in part due to its claim of, quote, leading an insurrection, something Green claimed after Jewish peace activists engaged in a sit-in at the U.S. Capitol, calling for a ceasefire in Gaza.
I'm looking right at you, President Biden. Are you going to be the president that funds and enables a genocide, or are you going to be the president that puts your foot down and stops a genocide? That's what we're here to ask.
Go ahead and lie to people and then send an insurrection into the Capitol complex with organized groups called Global Intifada, Jewish Voices for Peace, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, which we all have proof of, thankfully, because we went out where they were doing this insurrection. Don't forget that some of them assaulted police officers and hundreds of them got arrested. And Rashida Tlaib was completely involved in that group and gave a speech and launched them that day to do their insurrection.
This is where members of Congress and their staff, many of them have their offices. This happened earlier in the day. I'd say about 5 dozen, maybe 6 dozen activists wearing t-shirts that say not in our name, Jews say a ceasefire now.
Bring out Pence! Bring him out! Bring out Pence! Bring him out! Bring out Pence!
Green responded to Roy saying, quote, you voted to kick me out of the Freedom Caucus, but keep CNN wannabe Ken Buck and vaping, groping Lauren Boebert. Then Roy fired back saying, tell her to go chase so-called Jewish space lasers if she wants to spend time on that sort of thing. After, Green responded again, calling Roy Colonel Sanders.
And I want to tell you and remind everyone why conservative Americans across the country are absolutely disgusted with Republicans in Congress. And they are constantly disappointed and constantly upset that Republicans in Congress never hold the line. They never fight back. They never hold anyone accountable. They never actually do what they promise on the campaign trail. They never do what they promise their constituents. They come here to Washington and all of a sudden they lose their courage and they don't follow through and do the right thing. Let's be real and be honest. Democrats stick together. They band together and they never back down, even when they are lying through their teeth in front of the cameras, in front of the microphones. They never back down in attacking our former President Trump. They never back down in attacking Republicans. They never back down and never stop going after conservatives across America. And they have used the federal government and weaponized it against the people. But yet Republicans can't censure Rashida Tlaib? You gotta be kidding me.
House Resolution 610. Censuring Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. Whereas Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has repeatedly fanned the flames of racism, anti-Semitism, hate speech against the LGBTQ community, Islamophobia, Asian hate, xenophobia, and other forms of hatred. Whereas Marjorie Taylor Greene has repeatedly debased the memories of thousands of victims of the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001, by perpetuating conspiracy theories to shift blame and responsibility for mass murder. Whereas Marjorie Taylor Greene has repeatedly assaulted the foundation of our democracy by perpetuating conspiracy theories related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, which sought to halt the peaceful transfer of power. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene appeared at a white nationalist event that was condemned by the Republican Jewish coalition as, quote, appalling and outrageous that a member of Congress would share a platform with an individual who has actively spread anti-Semitic bile, mocked the Holocaust, and promoted dangerous anti-Israel conspiracy theories. Whereas on September 1st, 2022, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a tweet comparing President Joe Biden to Adolf Hitler that said, quote, Joe Biden is Hitler, hashtag Nazi Joe has to go, unquote. Whereas
On September 1st, 2022, Marjorie Taylor Greene posted another tweet of a doctored video showing President Biden speaking with audio of Hitler, swastikas in the background, and a mustache akin to that of Hitler. Whereas, on July 21st, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said that if she was, quote, in charge, she would kick out every single Chinese in this country that is loyal to the CCP. They would be gone. Whereas on December 19th, 2021, while at a Turning Point USA conference, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene referred to Asian Americans as, quote, yellow people, a slur that has been historically used to malign the Asian American community in the United States. Whereas Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has a history of perpetuating LGBTQ hate speech, including through her use of offensive posters in the halls of congressional office buildings beginning on February 24th, 2021. Whereas on November 22nd, 2022, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted that an LGBTQ California state senator was, quote, a communist groomer, unquote, an offensive slur that has been used to stoke fear and incite hatred of LGBTQ Americans. Whereas on March 7th, 2023, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene again referred to members of the LGBTQ community as, quote, groomers, and spouted anti-trans rhetoric on the floor of the House of Representatives. Whereas on June 1st, 2023, the first day of Pride Month, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted a photo showing an anti-trans poster that she had displayed in the hall outside of her congressional office. Whereas on February 22nd, 2019, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted a video on Facebook claiming that the Muslim American members of Congress were not, quote, really official because they didn't take the oath of office on the Bible. Whereas on June 17th, 2020, Politico reported that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene repeatedly engaged in Islamophobic rhetoric and suggested that Muslim Americans do not belong in the United States government. Whereas on May 10th, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene yet again referred to fellow Muslim American members of Congress as, quote, the Jihad Squad. Whereas on June 17th, 2020, Politico reported that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene referred to Black Americans as, quote, slaves to the Democratic Party and said that they should be proud to see Confederate monuments. Whereas on June 17th, 2020, Politico further reported that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene stated in a video, quote, I know a ton of white people that are as lazy and sorry and probably worse than black people, unquote. Whereas on May 18th, 2023, Marjorie Taylor Greene compared being called a white supremacist to a person of color being called the N-word, a vile racial slur. Whereas on January 28th, 2021, a video of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene resurfaced in which she used a harmful and offensive slur targeting Americans with disabilities with the National Down Syndrome Society called, quote, heartbreaking and unacceptable. Whereas on November 1st, 2018, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene denied the attacks on September 11th, saying there was, quote, a so-called plane that crashed into the Pentagon, and, quote, it's odd that there's never been any evidence to show a plane at the Pentagon. Whereas on November 17th, 2018, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene peddled a vile anti-Semitic trope when she claimed that wildfires in California were caused by space lasers operated by members of the Jewish community. Whereas on August 17th, 2020, a video of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene resurfaced in which she stated that the mass shooting at the Country Music Festival in Las Vegas, Nevada, where 60 people were murdered, was perpetuated in order to pass anti-gun legislation. Whereas on January 19th, 2021, Media Matters published a screenshot of Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene on Facebook, where she emphatically agreed that the mass shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, where 17 American students and teachers were murdered, was a false flag event. Whereas on January 21st, 2021, Media Matters published a screenshot on Facebook, a comment that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted that claimed 9/11 was, quote, done by our own government, to which she responded, that is all true. Whereas that same comment, liked and agreed to by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, further claimed that the mass shooting at Sandy Hook Elementary, where 26 people, including 20 precious children, were murdered, was staged. Whereas on September 3rd, 2020, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene posted an image of herself holding a gun next to images of 3 members of Congress with a caption encouraging, quote, going on offense after them. Whereas on January 26, 2021, CNN reported on posts, comments, and likes by Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene from 2018 and 2019, in which Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene liked several posts and comments on Facebook demonstrating her support for the execution of several members of the Democratic Party, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and President Barack Obama. Whereas on January 26, 2021, CNN further reported that Marjorie Taylor Greene liked a Facebook comment on January 2019 that stated, quote, a bullet to the head would be quicker, in reference to the removal of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Whereas on January 26, 2021, CNN also reported that deleted videos showed Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene calling for the execution of Speaker Nancy Pelosi and stating that she was, quote, a traitor to our country, that she's guilty of treason and should suffer death or she'll be in prison. Whereas Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene has perpetuated the big lie related to the 2020 presidential election by espousing conspiracy theories and by threatening and inciting violence. Whereas on October 26, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene downplayed the actions of those who participated in the January 6 attack on the Capitol and said, quote, if you think about what our Declaration of Independence says, it says to overthrow tyrants. Whereas on November 4th, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene went to visit those incarcerated related to the January 6th attack on the Capitol, in which she referred to them as, quote, the Patriot wing of the D.C. jail. Whereas on November 10th, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene referred to those who participated in the January 6th attack on the Capitol as, quote, political prisoners of war. Whereas on December 10th, 2021, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene said that if she had organized the January 6th attack on the Capitol, quote, we would have won. Not to mention, we would have been armed. Whereas on July 19th, 2023, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene displayed pornographic images during an official committee hearing that she claimed depicted a member of President Biden's family. Whereas on July 19th, 2023, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene sent an official press release and posted to her official congressional website a public hearing commentary featuring pornographic images she claimed depicted a member of President Biden's family. Whereas members of Congress have promised to always have the back of Marjorie Taylor Greene, no matter the extent of her vile and hateful behavior, now therefore be it resolved that Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene be censured